Hi guys, welcome to the session on time management. I'd love to learn a little bit about you guys before we get started. So why don't you type into the chat your name and where you're calling in from today. I'd also love to learn a little bit about your struggles with time management. What are you already doing to stay organized? Is it working for you? Let me know in the chat. Awesome. I love these responses. Thank you guys for opening up to me about your relationship with time management. You're here today, obviously, to learn some techniques that will help you get organized, enable you to feel productive, and that you've succeeded at accomplishing your objectives every single day. During our session together, we're going to use the chat heavily. If you guys have any questions, definitely throw them in there. And I'm for sure going to be asking you guys some questions and expect you to be active participants. Okay, we're going to break down those walls. We're going to get you feeling energized by the end of the session. Does that sound good? Give me a big yes in the chat. All right. Do you want to feel excited about your to-do list instead of stressed? Give me a yes. Of course you do. Do you want to be so productive that you'll actually have extra time you never thought was possible? Yes, of course you want that. My passion in life is to help people be their best, happiest selves. And time management is really a fundamental skill to help you get there. Today, we're actually going to complete a few exercises together so that within the next hour, you'll not only have listened to me talk about some of my favorite time management techniques, but you'll have actually taken concrete steps to start organizing yourself more efficiently. But first, so I'm not a total stranger, let me tell you guys a little bit about myself real quick before we get started. My philosophy is that life is kind of like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle without seeing the picture on the box. With any puzzle, you want to start with your four corners and work your way into the middle. So our four corners are family, friends, hobbies, and work. And that middle, that elusive picture that we're all working to identify and create for ourselves is whatever makes you truly happy in life. It's what gives you meaning. That's going to be different for every single person. And even though the four corners are kind of always there as categories, right? Maybe the job you wanted to have when you were 6 years old isn't the same job that you want to have now. Things change in life. That's totally fine. Just move that puzzle piece off to the side and replace it with a different piece for now. Finding your meaning, finding that thing that makes you feel whole is ongoing. And it can be a combination of things too. But once you think you know what it is, I'm all for organizing your life around the pursuit of that happiness. I actually became an entrepreneur to design my own dream life and be my own best boss. The middle of my puzzle is the freedom to be really spontaneous. It's flexibility. It's absolute power over my own schedule in a really extreme way that most companies just don't offer. I always loved what I was doing in my corporate jobs, and now I'm so lucky to help my clients in a really similar way. Even before I started coaching people one on one as a private consultant, I spent 6 years working for major companies in house, building learning and development programs to get their people to the next level. I've taught thousands of people in the classroom, on the job, in person and virtually, in groups, one on one, in topics ranging from communication, killer sales techniques, leadership versus management, presentation skills, personal branding, the list goes on. My specialty and really my passion has always been getting people to achieve their top performance by teaching them the specific skills that they need as individual learners in order to improve. And today, I'm so lucky to coach my private clients on identifying the middle of their puzzles. So I help people just like you to balance your four corners and to make time for everything that's important to you in life. Together, we set realistic goals, we formulate a step-by-step project plan to develop specific skills, and we take certain actions to achieve your objectives. And every step of the way, I keep you accountable. Whatever it is that you want to accomplish, you need good time management skills. right? You need good attention management skills, which is a distinction that we're going to talk about today as well. With this session, my goal is really to help you get yourself organized so that you can focus on your priorities. I want to help you to be present and really concentrate on just one thing at a time, to stop multitasking in ways that are actually wasting your time. Guys, how many of you sometimes honestly feel guilty or you feel bad about yourself for being behind schedule on something? I want you to feel good about yourselves. I want to get rid of those guilty bad feelings. I want you to feel confident that you're doing the most important things on your task list, that you know what those even are, and that you're on track to complete all of those objectives. Guys, it's completely possible to enjoy going away for the week without freaking out that something work related is still pending. And that's totally true whether you work for yourself or for a company. So if you're sitting here thinking, Natalie, my job is literally 24/7, guys, I hear you. Even if you feel that you need to always be on email or that you need to work crazy hours, you need to always be accessible, if you prioritize and you really focus, then you can accomplish all of those things, still give off the appearance that you're accessible and you are accessible, but you can still make time to enjoy your own life and find your own happiness at the same time. So I've said I'm all about helping you to hit your top performance, and that really comes down to you guys being accountable. So I can put a bunch of great tools in your toolbox, and you're the person who has to pick them up and start using them if you want to see any results. So the first step to your success is a worksheet that I put together just for you guys. I'm typing a link into the chat, so go ahead and click that link so you can pull up that worksheet. Feel free to print it out right now. You can write your answers directly on there. The first half of the session is going to be focused around this worksheet. So definitely make sure you click that link. You want to pull that up. If you don't want to print it out or you don't have access to a printer, you can just open it up and follow along. Write your answers somewhere like a Word document or old school style using pen and paper, whatever works for you. I'm going to give you guys a minute to open up that worksheet. All right, guys, are you ready? Have the worksheet pulled up? This is going to be great. So, step one is a bit of self reflection. It's the first step to getting organized. So, we're going to write out how a typical week in your life looks right now. Be honest. This can be a general list of things that you do. When do you practice self care? How much of your week is devoted to your job, to your hobbies, to the people in your life? Guys, be honest here. You're the only person who's seeing this right now. Okay. Don't write what you wish your week looked like. Write how it actually looks right now. There are 24 hours in a day. So times that by 7 in a 7-day week, there are 168 hours. So we're going to account for all 168 hours in your week. Yes, we're going to even include sleep in that. Make sure you block that off. Take the next 5 minutes to get this list together. Okay, I'm going to put a timer on my end for 5 minutes. You guys can feel free to do the same thing. I'll be available in the chat if you need anything. So guys, remember, I'm in the chat if you need anything. This is definitely going to take you the full 5 minutes at least. This could totally take longer, but we're capped on time here. I want you to really go deep, think into a really a greater level of detail. Okay. Okay, guys, so just to give you some prompts, instead of saying you're at work 8 to 6 Monday through Friday, I want you to include in that block of time a list of all the tasks that you do in a typical week. So do you have a specific project that you're working on right now with an end date in sight? How often do you have those kind of projects that have a specific end date? And how many of those do you have usually, right? How many do you have on your plate in any given week? Do you consistently work on the same program that's more of an ongoing maintenance kind of thing? And how many hours a week are you doing that? Okay, let's break down your specific tasks for that ongoing stuff too. Something else that you guys want to think about is meetings, right? So how many hours a week are you typically in meetings? What kind of meetings are they? Are they meetings with your boss? Are they status updates? Are they with a team member? Are they with clients? Are they kind of planned in advance or are they last minute? Really, how important to your performance are those meetings, right? And then the last prompt I want to give you guys um, is, the maybe more logistical kind of things like replying to emails and phone calls. Um, People sometimes underestimate how much time they actually spend replying to people's requests. How often do people stop by your desk to chit chat, and how much of that conversation is actually work related versus maybe kind of a time waster? Be honest here with this breakdown, okay? This is just a look in the mirror, a quick snapshot of how your week looks right now. And there's no shame in, if you're spending tons of time on what we might call time wasters, that's okay. Whatever you have going on right now, we're going to work with. So we have just about another minute to wrap this up. Okay, I'm in the chat if you need anything. All right, guys, that's time. Thanks for being truthful with yourselves and for putting that list together. So tell me in the chat, type how you're feeling right now, having written down your current kind of state of the union. All right, so then the second step is going to take a little bit more courage from you. And this exercise today is just your first draft, okay? So it's something that we can rework on your own after the session. It's going to be a work in progress, right? And what you have right now as your ideal week could change in 6 months. It could change in 2 years, right? Your goals and your priorities and what really gives you meaning in life might change. So this is just kind of a snapshot in time for what your puzzle looks like right now, or what you want your puzzle to kind of look like. And we're trying to take actionable steps to help you move from your current situation, your current typical week, toward, as close as we can get toward your ideal week. Okay. So step 2 is how you want your typical week to look and what steps you're going to take to achieve that. So break this down at the same level of detail that you did the last exercise in step 1. We want to write down how much time you want to spend each week on each item, in your ideal world. And keep in mind what your puzzle looks like right now. So how much time do you want to spend on each of your 4 corners? What's going on in the middle of your puzzle right now? How does that look? What gives you the most happiness and what gives you the most meaning right now? And then specifically, what action items do you need to do to get yourself living closer to that ideal life? So if you see a disconnect between what you wrote down for step 1 and what you're about to write down for step 2, we want to also, in step 2, write out the specific week by week steps that you're going to take in order to make that change. So that includes things that you want to keep from your current routine, things that you want to add or supplement to your current routine, and then some things that we want to delete or take away from your current routine that are not really benefiting you and that are not helping you to achieve your happiness. Okay? And remember, guys, this is for 168 hours a week. We're accounting for 100% of our time. So we have 7 minutes for this exercise. I'm going to set a timer on my end, and I'm in the chat if you need anything. So guys, we're almost halfway done with the 7-minute timer for step two. I know I'm giving you fewer verbal prompts. Again, if you have any questions, type them into the chat box. I'm right here if you need anything. Guys, there's just about a minute and a half left. Okay, so start thinking about wrapping up your thoughts for step two. Again, this is your kind of project plan, as it were, to um, take what you have in step one and see what you want to keep from it, what you want to add to it, and what you want to take away from it in order to create your ideal week and have that be your reality. And so step two is, identifying pieces that fall into those three categories and also writing down the specific steps that you need to take in order to get there. Okay, just about a minute left. All right, guys. So while some of you are still wrapping this up in the last few seconds, type in the chat box. Let me know how you guys are feeling. I know sometimes it's a little bit jarring to see the difference between your reality, between how your week looks right now, and what you would ideally like it to look like. So let me know how you're feeling about that, and also what are some of the areas that you're planning to change up. If you're open to sharing, I'd love to hear. Let me know in the chat. All right, hopefully everyone's back up, and thanks for sharing your thoughts. Making enough time in the day to get everything done at the end of the day is all about prioritizing, knowing realistically how long things will take, and keeping yourself on track while you check those items off your list. Have you guys heard of the Eisenhower matrix? Type yes or no in the chat. Let me know if you've heard of this. The Eisenhower matrix. Some people also call it the time management matrix. Okay, so this is a really great tool to help you prioritize which items on your list to actually do first. Let me tell you a little bit about it. So you probably know Dwight Eisenhower for being a two-term US president from 1953 to 61. But before that, he was actually a US Army general. And then during World War II, he was the Allied Forces Supreme Commander. And later, he was NATO's first Supreme Commander. So, wow, this guy had to make tons of tough decisions every single day in all those jobs. So he developed this matrix to help guide him. And for decades now, this method has been one of the building blocks of effective time management. So what you see here is that we've got 4 quadrants on the graph that rank importance and urgency. So every single thing that you do in life can be placed into one of these 4 quadrants. On the vertical axis, you have importance. So the 2 quadrants at the top, Q1 and Q2, are high importance, while those toward the bottom in Q3 and Q4 are low importance. That means that you absolutely have to do what's in Q1 and Q2 in order to accomplish your objective. Okay, these are critical to your success. All of these tasks that you put into Q1 and Q2 are absolute must-dos. Okay, so now let's talk about the horizontal axis, which is urgency. If we're looking at this graph from a math perspective, you might think that urgency increases to the right, like it's positive, but here actually it's highest at the left. So guys, I don't think that it was a high priority for Eisenhower to make this look like a graph from algebra class. The point is to prioritize your tasks. So let's cut him some slack, who's a busy guy. While importance is high at the top and low at the bottom, urgency is high at the left and low at the right. So we have tasks in Q1 or quadrant 1 and Q3 or quadrant 3 that are highly urgent, with tasks in Q2 and Q4 on the right side, those are less urgent. When you break down this chart, obviously there are 4 categories and each of them is a different priority level. So I'm going to give you guys a lot of examples for specific types of tasks that go into each of these 4 quadrants. So feel free to write some of these down. Make sure you have a pen and paper handy or a Word document that you type stuff into, however you'd like to take notes. We're going to go through a lot of info. So Q1 at the top left is where you put things that are highly important, meaning they have to get done, and they're also highly urgent, meaning if you push them to the back burner for too long, there is going to be a noticeable negative impact on your performance really quickly, right? So this could happen day to day. A lot of the time people associate the items on their daily to-do list with Q1. People typically write down stuff that has to get done within a short amount of time, like a daily to-do list or a weekly to-do list that people commonly will use. So that's what people associate with Q1. Crises are also important to solve, and they get put into Q1 as well. And those always jump to the top of our priority list. So you as an individual don't necessarily have to be the person that handles every single thing on this chart within Q1 or any of the quadrants, but you are the person who's going to be held accountable. And we'll talk about delegation later a little bit, but keep in mind that even if you delegate a task to someone else, or if you automate that task, you're still responsible for making sure that the task gets done successfully. And the fact that you're not doing it yourself doesn't mean that it gets pushed down on your list of priorities, right? So even if you delegate a task to someone else on your team, that could still be your number one priority, even if you're not responsible for it, but you are accountable for it. Okay, let's take a look at Q2. So the second quadrant is where we put really important stuff that isn't necessarily urgent. So meaning if we don't do it right away, kind of fine. But if we keep avoiding it over time, we'll see negative results pile up. This is typically, Q2 is typically where we tend to put things like professional development, right? Things like staying current in your industry, getting that next level certification, taking an extra class, mentoring somebody. If those things aren't necessarily required for you to do your job in this exact moment, like today or this week, but if you never do them, you'll see a negative impact on your success, right? Those are the types of things that we want to put in Q2. Something else that might go into Q2 is making time for your loved ones. For example, your family might understand if you have to work late one night and miss a family dinner, if that's a tradition you guys have. But if you miss family dinner every single night for 3 weeks, that can really put a strain on your relationships. So in addition to professional development and relationship building, other things to go into Q2 are team building, right? If you let that slide for long enough, you're going to see some really nasty effects pile up. Things like building out your strategy, writing your business plan, just in general, doing more of your big picture thinking. So the exercises that we're doing right now in this session would really be a Q2 type of activity. So for some people, if you haven't done this for a really long time, items that are usually in Q2 could go into Q1 because they're really urgent. You haven't taken a professional development class in 3 years. It's like long overdue. But typically, if you're monitoring this and you're managing how often you develop yourself, we want to put those items into Q2. So if you guys have any questions so far, I want to make sure everyone's with me. Type your questions into the chat. Okay, I'm gonna keep talking about quadrant 3 and 4, but I'm definitely here to answer questions in the chat as well. Okay. So the next quadrant, Q3, this is where we put things of low importance and high urgency. So a lot of the times these things manifest themselves as distractions or interruptions that you might be thinking are actually important, but when you really think about it, they're not critical to your success. So this could be like, helping a colleague in the office when they stop by your desk with a question. So at first glance, you might think like, oh, this is productive because it's kind of work related. I'm going to ultimately benefit the company because I'm helping a colleague with a project that I somehow have a little bit to do with, but I'm not responsible for it, right? If that's not actually on your to-do list, when you really break it down, it's not required of you to do your job. Like if you spent all of your time answering colleagues' questions when they stop by your desk instead of doing your own work, you'd probably not be doing a good job at your job. So that kind of thing, as helpful as it is to other people and as urgent as other people might make it seem to them, it's kind of in your face. It feels like you have to do it right now, but it's really an item of low importance on your list. And you need to, put yourself first, and you need to prioritize things that are going to contribute to your productivity and to your performance. Something else that goes into Q3 is something like reading every single email the second it flies into your inbox. So according to multiple psychology studies conducted over the last 3 decades, multitasking in this way, where your brain has to switch between two tasks, it creates brief mental blocks. So those blocks could be just a few tenths of a second per switch. But if you're constantly multitasking all day, like if you're constantly checking your email every time you get that thing, that notification, that switching could cost you as much as 40% of your productive time. 40. That's a ton of your time that's just being wasted. So items in Q3 aren't always avoidable, right? I hear people telling me all the time, my clients tell me all the time, Natalie, I'm in a service industry, I'm in a service business. My clients need to know that I'm accessible whenever they email me. Or sometimes people in more of a sales capacity will say, Natalie, if I don't respond to an email as soon as it comes in, I'm going to lose that deal. I get that there are some situations where that does happen, 100%. And we'll talk more later on about, you know, best practices for monitoring your emails in a way that helps you to be responsive and accessible and on when you need to be, but then also whereby you can be focusing on more important tasks that are not just responding to other people's inquiries all day long. Okay, so items in Q3 they're not always avoidable, but we want to work on actively limiting them. Okay. So then the fourth and final quadrant, Q4, this is probably some of the easiest stuff to identify. These are your true time wasters. So they're low importance and they're low urgency in the context of you achieving your goal. So for example, if your aim is to do a really great job at work and get that promotion, then taking long lunches and chit-chatting with your colleagues is neither urgent nor important in you achieving that goal. And the same thing could be said for going down the rabbit hole on social media. It's so easy to get sucked into scrolling endlessly and aimlessly through your Instagram feed or your Facebook homepage. And unless you're doing that kind of stuff for work, like it's for marketing, your business or something like that, it's a total escape from accomplishing more productive things in your life. Guys, it's okay to sometimes waste time. I'll give you a little embarrassing glimpse into my life recently. I watched the entire season of Bachelor in Paradise, which was in no way related to work and which did not at all advance me professionally or personally. I just got sucked into it and I rolled with it. Cut yourself some slack if you decide to spend your time on Q4 time wasters. That's fine. You deserve that waste of time if that's what you feel like doing. But you have to make sure that you're limiting how much time it is that you're spending in Q4, right? You don't want to spend all of your time. You don't want to spend even a big percentage of your time. You want to keep that a small little sliver. And you also want to make sure that you don't focus on Q4 stuff when you should really be spending that time in a different quadrant, doing a task that's really urgent or something that's really important. Maybe you've been putting it off, but it's really important to get done, right? So people who spend a lot of time in Q3 and Q4 and a little bit of time in Q1 and barely any time in Q2 are your, quintessential chronic procrastinators, right? And a lot of the time my clients will tell me, Natalie, it's so hard for me to stop myself from spending this time in Q4 and especially spending time in Q3 because I get these requests all day long. I get slammed on email. I get phone calls up the wazoo. People stop by my desk. I shut my door and people still knock and come in. What can I do? Really, what we're doing now on this worksheet is going to help you actively and really actionably organize your time. So you're going to organize what you pay attention to, and you're going to organize by the end of the session. I hope you guys will feel really good about the way that you're organizing your time. Okay. So you want to balance your time between the four quadrants so that your scale isn't being tipped too heavily in any one direction. And how much time you spend in each quadrant could change day by day. It could change week by week, right? I mentioned before that a lot of people will associate the things that they write on their to-do list with Q1, and that's accurate in the sense that people typically write the most important and the most urgent things on their to-do list. However, we need to make space on our to-do lists every day and every week for items in every quadrant. okay, as much as possible. That way we can prevent ourselves from spending too little or too much time in any particular space. It's so easy to sometimes forget to make time for Q2 and neglect our own development and big picture strategy setting, right? And then 6 months fly by and you're like, I haven't set my strategy for the year and it's already fall. What am I doing? So you really need to actively put this down into your to-do list so that it doesn't just fall by the wayside. Likewise, it's sometimes so easy to not realize how much time we're spending in Q3 and Q4 and end up being way less productive than we'd really like to be. So it's all about finding a balance that works for you and organizing yourself so that you can make time for everything in your life that's important to you. Okay, so we're going to take our step 2 list from the worksheet. We're going to add to it a little bit. So the specific items that you have on your list are each going to fit into one of these 4 quadrants. So take the next 2 minutes and write down which quadrant each item goes into. Okay, so there's a space on your worksheet where you want to write down specific quadrants for each task in that list. Okay, so you can just write 1, 2, 3, or 4. And when you're done, tally up the total amount of time that you'd be spending in each quadrant in this ideal picture. Okay, in this ideal week of 168 hours, I want to know what percentage of your time you're spending in each quadrant. And as always, I'm in the chat if you have any questions. Okay, so 2 minutes starts now. So remember, you're ranking each item by its importance in your overall big picture, right? Is this specific task helping you to be productive and to accomplish your objectives, your goals? Or is it less important? Is it highly urgent or does it have a low level of urgency? Okay, you have about 30 seconds left. All right, guys, let me know in the chat how your quadrant breakdown looks. What percentage of your time are you spending in each of the 4 quadrants in your ideal week? All right, guys, thanks for sharing. At this point on your worksheet, you've done step 1, which was to be honest with yourself and reflect on how your schedule looks right now. And you've done step 2, which was to redraft that schedule based on how much time you'd like to spend in your ideal, more productive week. So you'll most likely need to redraft your step 2 yet again to make sure that you're including items in every quadrant if you didn't already do that, with the heaviest emphasis obviously on Q1 and Q2. You want to limit how much time you live in Q3 and Q4, but still leave open a realistic space for those less important tasks. So this is a self-reflection exercise. Typically, I would, give way longer than 7 minutes or even an hour to do this worksheet. But I'm really, really happy that you guys have your first draft completed. Success! If you want a more in-depth one-on-one conversation with me to build this out and help you achieve that ideal week and that ideal lifestyle, email me after the session and we can talk about private coaching at a reasonable budget. That door is open if you guys agree that's the best solution for you at this time. But during this session, we still have about 15 minutes left together. So in that remaining time, I want to talk a little bit more about some time management basic techniques that you can start using today to feel more productive while you work toward accomplishing your objectives from step 2. So after you've prioritized which tasks to do based on their importance and their urgency, it's time to actually get stuff done. Task batching is when you set aside one time to complete items that are similar in nature. So you might say that you're going to check emails like 3 or 4 times a day and that's it. Or you might group doing all of your outbound cold calls for that day into one block of time. And then you do all your prep work for like 3 different client demos in the same block of time in the afternoon. When you batch your tasks like this, it's so much easier to really get into a groove. That's why so many sales companies have power hours where all the sales rep make their outbound cold calls at the same time. So it turns a 60-minute task batch into a fun, friendly kind of competition. It can also help you to be more realistic about how long tasks are actually taking you. And it really helps you to break down those larger projects into manageable bites so that it feels less overwhelming. Okay, so next up, I want to talk about the 2-minute rule, which is also really easy to implement and it can be misunderstood pretty easily. So the rule says that if something takes you 2 minutes or less to do it, then you should just do it and not put it off. However, guys, this is during your processing time and not at any other time. You always want to stay in control of how you're using your time. And people can really easily twist this rule to say, oh, every time an email comes into my inbox, I'll reply if it takes me less than 2 minutes to respond. Wrong. It's more about not pushing off a bunch of tiny things that could be checked off your list easily, but doing them in a way that doesn't interfere with your other project work where you're getting in the zone. So I like to batch these 2-minute tasks together. It makes me really feel like I'm Jim Cramer in his lightning round, like firing off answers left and right in a really short time span. For example, if you say, I'm only going to check my emails every 3 hours, so like at 9, 12, 3, and 5, then at those intervals, you can actually go down your inbox and ask yourself, will replying to this email take me less than 2 minutes? And if so, then just do it and kind of knock a bunch out at the same time. But if responding to that email requires a more in-depth conversation, or if you think there could be like a lot of back and forth emailing that you just don't have the capacity to deal with at that moment in time, then I recommend that you schedule an appropriate length of time later on to go over your response with that person who sent you that email. So if it's 10 minutes, if it's 30 minutes, whatever that length of time is that you think you need to really devote to, a thorough response, I recommend that you schedule that for even that afternoon or the next day or the next week, whenever you have an availability in your schedule. And maybe that conversation takes place on the phone. Ideally, it's in person. Okay. So doing a weekly review, just to move down this bullet point, doing a weekly review is also a really great use of your Q2 time. So toward the end of each week, you can set aside an hour to make sure that you've accomplished all of the tasks that were on your list for that week and to analyze how much time you spent in each quadrant that week, right? And you also want to plan out your next week. So the first few times that you do this, it might actually take you closer to 2 hours to do this weekly review. So be generous with yourself while you're learning. I personally have been doing this for years, and at this point, I typically spend about an hour toward the end of each week doing my own weekly review. So I usually like to do it on a Thursday afternoon while I have my coffee, so I can still have some wiggle room if I realize like, oh my gosh, there are all these things that came up this week that I was dealing with, and I didn't make time for X, Y, and Z that was already on my list. I have the opportunity to work a little bit later on Thursday night or, move some things around on Friday without having work dip into my weekend. So I also like to keep a monthly chart and plan out my big picture quarterly and annual goals, which obviously take longer than just an hour. But it's so important to relate your big picture goals to the nitty gritty details of your day to day tasks. And at the end of each day and the end of each week, you should know exactly what you've accomplished to meet your bigger goals. And that's really something you can only achieve if you plan the big stuff in advance and you leave sufficient wiggle room for adjustments and new projects that come up. So a lot of the time it can feel really scary to look at your to-do list and think, oh my God, do I really have enough time to accomplish all of this? So this is where these last two pieces at the bottom come in. Delegation and automation can be your best friends. If there's a way you can automate something, 100% do it. There's no reason to do things manually if you can automate them and be more efficient and use your time for higher thinking type of tasks. So if you can automate any of your emails or your status updates or your reports that go out to your key stakeholders, this is something that you definitely want to do. And depending on what the task is that you're trying to automate, chances are there's a software or app out there that can help you to do it. Um, and lastly, delegation is another huge time saver if it's appropriate. So even if you don't have a team of people underneath you to help you, there are so many ways you can delegate to your peers or sometimes to your boss or even to your spouse or the other people in your life. Like, for example, if you usually make dinner for your family, but you have a really busy day this Wednesday, you can delegate to your partner making or picking up dinner, which will free up some time for you to focus on your more urgent tasks that day. And typically, if you approach delegation with the right attitude and the right communication style, um, people are receptive and people want to help you. It's when we try to um, pawn stuff off to other people because we don't want to make time for it that people start to get upset. Or if you do it at the last minute, and kind of are unapologetic about it, that could also rub people the wrong way. So we could do a whole hour-long session just about delegation. But basically, you want to focus on the most important things first by batching like tasks. You want to block off specific times in the day to complete each task, and you want to ignore distractions so you can really get in the zone. Um, and what we call being in the zone is actually called a state of flow in the field of positive psychology. It's a mental state of operation where you're fully immersed, you're fully focused, you're fully involved in whatever task it is that you're doing at that moment. And it feels awesome. You feel energized, you're excited, you're like, I'm on a roll. Sometimes I'm reading up on something that'll help a client and I get so into it, I'm so in the zone that I don't even realize I've been in the zone until someone knocks on my door and interrupts my state of flow. And I'm like, wow, has it really been 3 hours? Did I time travel? Like time has just flown by. And now I realize that I haven't eaten all day and I'm actually kind of hungry. So when you're in that state of peak performance, that state of flow, you don't really have much attention left over to monitor how your body's feeling. So achieving that state of flow is a precise balance between the challenge of the task and your skill level. So we see that on the graph here. If you're trying to do something really challenging, like way above your skill level, you might feel anxious because you don't even know where to start. But then on the flip side, you might feel totally in control if you're doing something that's moderately challenging, but that you're a pro at. Maybe you've done this before, maybe you've got the skill set to knock this out of the park. But a state of flow, that's all the way at the top right. A state of flow is your peak performance where the level of the challenge is high and the skills that you have to meet that challenge are also high. This is the state of mind where you get really into something that you also really enjoy and are good at. If you're feeling unhappy at work, maybe it boils down to one of these reasons. Are you challenging yourself enough? And are you developing your skills to be great at that task? So keep these factors in mind when you redraft your list from step 2 after the session. You want to think, are most of the tasks in all of your four quadrants going to get you to that state of flow? If they're not, how can you tweak them so that you're closer to that state of peak performance, that state of flow? Do you need to enhance your skill, or do you need to make the task more challenging? Or is it a little bit of both? Right? If you can try to incorporate a high level, a moderate to high level of challenge and a moderate to high level of skill required from you, you're going to keep yourself more engaged. And the higher you get that challenge level and the higher you get that skill level, as long as they're a match, you can totally get into that state of flow. And guys, it feels so good. So a really big piece of helping you to move away from those distractions and toward a state of flow is attention management. The way that people work has changed so much in the last few decades. Now it sometimes feels that because of email and cell phones, we have to always be available. It's harder to find that boundary between work and personal. When you master attention management, you can avoid burnout by doing things like protecting your free time and not monitoring emails on vacation, or controlling your technology and turning off those notifications. By doing those things, you can actually make yourself more productive and more energetic during the day that you do commit to working, right? So during the time that you're committing to working, you can actually feel more productive. You can improve your ability to focus. You can feel present. You can get to that state of flow, right? So this whole list of techniques is something that you really want to think deep about and really adopt at least parts of these into your work life and into your personal life, that you create that balance. Okay. So there's really no way for us to create more hours in the day, right? We have 168 hours each and every week. But what we can do is better manage how we spend our attention during those 168 hours. And that's what I'm trying to help you guys accomplish with this worksheet. So I want you to be really intentional with the way that you're spending your time. And it's fine if you want to spend a decent amount of time in Q3 and Q4, as long as you factor that in to your overall time management plan, right? You want to be intentional about this. So one of my favorite techniques to control my behavior, I mentioned on the right side under techniques here. It's called the Pomodoro technique. It's super simple for you to adopt. It was invented by Francisco Cirillo in the late 80s when he used one of those cute Pomodoro kitchen timers that look like tomatoes and you twist them, to set the timer. It's a really simple technique. You can use literally any time with a clock on your phone, an app, a microwave timer. All you do is set the timer to 25 minutes, and by the time the bell rings, you have to have completed that task. So it's a really great tool for helping you to estimate how long tasks should actually take you to complete. If you finish the task and there's time left over in your 25 minutes, then you just use that remaining balance to overlearning, meaning getting better at the skill that you were just using for that task. Also, if any interruptions come up during the 25 minutes, then you'd quickly decide whether it's urgent enough to stop your Pomodoro. For example, if a crisis comes up, and if it's not urgent, you would just write down how to handle the interruption after your Pomodoro is done. So, for example, if your phone rings while you're in the middle of a task, you could decide to just write down like call back so and so and finish your task, and then after the task, add it to your callback list, or call in if you think it might be an emergency. Usually, phone calls, emails, people stopping by your desk with questions, they can all wait like up to 25 minutes for your response, right? Usually, things are not super urgent, and people can wait up to 25 minutes. In that scenario, better yet, you could turn your phone on Do Not Disturb or DND, or put the ringer volume on silent so you don't even hear that and get distracted until after your Pomodoro 25-minute time chunk is up. After each 25-minute task, you'd take a quick 3 to 5 minute break, clear your headspace, and then after you've done 4 Pomodoro tasks, you'd take a longer break for like 15 to 30 minutes. Wash, rinse, repeat. You take short breaks after each task and longer breaks after completing every fourth task. So this is a great way to record how much of your time is actually being spent on your tasks And it's an amazing, easy way to control your behavior and really focus your attention and eliminate distractions so you can get in the zone, right? You want to achieve that state of flow. Um, Tons of info, right? There are so many techniques available to help you manage your time and attention better so that you're really maximizing every minute of your life. When you prioritize and when you focus, at first it might take a little bit longer while you're still getting the hang of it, but pretty soon you'll find that you actually have much more free time, you're less stressed, and you're overall happier, and your jigsaw puzzle is more complete, right? You can kind of see that middle of your puzzle a little bit better. So let's recap what we talked about today. You wrote down your week on paper and planned out which tasks you're going to keep, add, and remove. We've talked about the Eisenhower matrix of importance and urgency, which will help you to prioritize. We've gone through a bunch of time-saving tools that you can start implementing today. And we've walked through how to achieve a state of flow using specific attention management tools like the Pomodoro technique. So guys, have you noticed that we say things like spending time and paying attention and investing your energy? These things, time, attention, energy, they're all resources that we use every second and every minute, and wasting them can be really costly. So when you control how you spend your time, you're in the driver's seat. You're letting yourself live a more balanced life. You're letting yourself pursue your meaning, and it feels so good, guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really proud of you for taking the first step in managing your time better, which is asking for help attending a professional development webinar like this. Here are some ways that you can reach me. I would absolutely love if you sent me an email with your feedback on this session. Did you find it helpful? What parts really clicked with you? Send me an email, call me directly, get in touch with me if you want some more one-on-one guidance on getting yourself organized and living your dream life.